Chapter 3.
And, as said earlier, this hurricane is expected to reach the south shore of Vietnam by 6 o'clock a.m., Central Time, off of the Gulf of Siam. Now, in local news, Craig's highs for the day is expected to reach up to 30 degrees, winds out of the north at approximately 20 knots with gusts up to 50 knots. Local police, this morning, responded to a two-car accident that killed one local resident while two residents of Steamboat Springs were airlifted to Denver. The local resident, that had died in this accident, was identified as being Connie Henderson. For those of you that don't know, Connie Henderson has been employed by the Moffat County School District for almost 30 years as she taught social studies and science. Services will be held at the Catholic Church tonight at 8 o'clock. If you would like to leave Connie Henderson's family your condolence, you're urged to attend this service. Funeral arrangements will be within the following week.
Oh my God, David. I can't believe it. We've known her for most of our lives, Karina said as she laid against David's side. Seems like the worst things happen to the best people. I know, honey, David agreed as he held onto his trembling wife. They had just turned the radio on, to listen to some country music, on their day off of work, when the news had come on. The news of the death instantly put Karina into tears. She would have been 74 years old this year. That's a lot of students that she's taught, he continued as he attempted to calm her down. Yeah. You're right. Karina managed. She was born in 1942. I don't know, I just expected her to live longer. Well, she probably would have. This was a car accident. Not natural causes. She didn't smoke, drink. Hell, she was in good shape. She could have probably lived to be 100. Though the day started out rough, Karina's mind was more at ease as the day progressed. In all, and only because of his age, Ronnie was the only one in the house that wasn't affected by the death of Mrs. Henderson. What was unknown to everyone in the household, however, and, once again with an exception of Ronnie, David, and Nicole, is that Karina, Malachi, and Eddie had all confided in Mrs. Henderson, at one time or another, about the nightmares that seemed to have overrun their lives. The church service that night had attracted over 200 local residences and then around 50 relatives of Mrs. Henderson's from out of town. Like what you would expect at a funeral, many of those that showed up at the church had either short poems or just something to say about their good memories of Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. DeClue. A voice called out as they were about to leave the church. Turning around immediately, Karina found herself looking at Sterling. Well, hi Sterling. How are you doing, honey? Karina asked as she reached out and put her hand on his shoulder. Considering the circumstances, I'm holding together pretty well. But pausing for a moment as he pulled out a little black book out of his back pocket, my Grandma Henderson. She was your grandmother? Karina interrupted. Yeah. In fact, she spoke very highly of you, David, Malachi, and Eddie. Pausing for a moment, as he looked down to Ronnie, he continued. Ronnie, she liked you too. My grandma told me that if anything were to ever happen to her that she wants you guys to have this book. Handing the small book to Karina, he paused and then continued, I honestly don't know what is in the book, but she did feel that it would be important for you to have it. Well, thank you, Sterling. Sterling, I really wish that you would come over and visit. Malachi, Nicole, and Eddie would really be happy to see you sometime. Well, Mrs. DeClue. Just call me Karina, hun. I'm sorry. Karina, please tell Malachi, Nicole, and Eddie that I'll come over tonight to visit. Then, after he looked at his watch, he continued. In fact, I'll just follow on over there right now. How's that sound? That sounds great, Sterling. I'm just waiting on David. All right? Okay. I'm gonna go out and warm up my truck real quick. It's way too cold outside today. You're right. Ronnie answered, then turned and walked out. Hey Ronnie, how about you go out with Sterling and warm up the car while I rush your father? All right, honey? With this, Karina pulled out her keys and handed them to Ronnie. All right, Mom. Ronnie answered, then turned and walked out the door with Sterling. So how are you doing, Ronnie? Sterling asked as he put his arm over Ronnie's shoulder. All right. I guess. Do you remember me? Sterling asked and then pulled himself away as he looked for the answer in Ronnie's face. Yeah. I remember you. You came over for Eddie's birthday 5 years ago. Well, that's a good memory. 5 years is a long time. How old are you now? Sterling asked just as he stopped at the door of a cherry red colored pickup truck and then pulled his keys out of his pocket and pressed a button on its remote control. I'll be 13 this November. Hold on a second, Sterling, I'm gonna start my parents' car. As Ronnie said this, he quickly raced, in the ankle-deep snow, to a little maroon-colored Eagle Talon, and then jumped in and started its motor. Well, that's a nice-looking car that your mom has. What year is it? Sterling asked as he looked in at the upholstery of the newer-looking vehicle. 2015. It's a year old, but we just bought it a couple of months ago. Then, as Ronnie looked over Sterling's shoulder, he saw his parents coming up behind him. Hey guys. Dave said. You guys ready to go? Yes sir, Sterling said as he stood up from his crept-over position and turned to see Dave. How are you doing, Sterling? Dave asked as he reached out to shake the 15-year-old's hand. Fairly good. Just looking forward to seeing Nicole, Malachi, and Eddie again. Well, you know that are welcome to come over anytime, Sterling. I don't quite understand why, but Malachi, Nicole, and Eddie tend to only go out at night. With an exception that Nicole works during the evening. It's like as if they became nocturnal or something. With a confused look on his face, Dave scratched the side of his head. Well, I'll meet you guys over at your house, Sterling said, and then trudged back through the poorly plowed parking lot towards his truck. With slush in the road, the drive back to the top of Finley Lane took about 10 minutes. After about 2 hours worth of visiting, the visit turned into a sleepover as Sterling stayed up with Malachi, Nicole, and Eddie to play cards. Ronnie, whom had to be at school the following morning, went to bed early. It was about noon the next day that news of the date and time for Mrs. Henderson's funeral arrived within a phone call. Patty DeClue called and spoke to Karina after she had personally called and spoke to the priest of the church. All right guys. Karina announced after hanging up the phone, the funeral is set for March 21st at 1 o'clock. Then the burial will be immediately after. With the recent loss of Sterling's grandmother, he was excused out of school until after the funeral. Well, Sterling. I'm sure that it would be all right with my parents if you wanted to stay a little longer, Malachi said as he turned his head towards his mother. Ah. Yeah, Sterling. You're more than welcome, Karina agreed. Hey Sterling. Eddie interrupted. Yeah, Eddie? Sterling responded without a chance to answer Malachi's mother. Would you please run down to my bedroom and grab my wallet for me? He asked as he finished washing up a load of dishes. Yeah, sure. Hold on a minute, I'll be right back, Sterling said, and then quickly raced down the stairs. Then, just as the sound of his footsteps on stairs faded off, Eddie quickly went to the kitchen table by Malachi's side. Karina. Sterling was living with his grandmother. His parents were both killed in an accident years ago. Sterling might not know, however, that we are aware of this. For a moment Karina just sat there not knowing what to say. Then, just as they heard Sterling coming up the stairs, she said the first thing that came to her mind. All right. Don't say anything to him. I'll talk to him. Hey. Here you go, Eddie, Sterling said as he walked into the kitchen. Thank you, Sterling. I just wanted to finish up the last of the dishes real quick, Eddie said, then slipped the leather wallet into his back pocket. Sterling. Karina had quickly come up with a way to get Sterling by himself. She had been planning to have a yard sale as soon as the weather broke in the spring. In the meantime, she had a lot of items that she wanted moved to the garage to prepare for this sale. If you would be willing, I need your help moving a few things out to the garage. Would you mind? I'd be more than happy to help. Just tell me what you need done, Sterling said excitedly. All in about an hour, Karina had explained to Sterling that she was aware of his situation at home and had invited him to move into the last spare room in the house. Reluctantly he accepted her offer and then arranged it, with Eddie and Malachi, for them to help him load his stuff into his truck and bring it over to their house. We'll have to do it tonight though, Eddie, Malachi said. We'll put everything that you need tonight in your room, and then everything else in the garage, until you're ready to unpack the stuff. Okay? Sounds like a plan to me. Sterling answered. Then, as he looked at Karina, he continued. Thank you for letting me stay, Karina. I really appreciate it. You're welcome, Sterling. You guys be careful tonight. Understand? Karina asked as she stared directly at Eddie and Malachi. No tricks. She thought. We understand. Eddie answered for Malachi and himself. Eventually, around 3:30, Ronnie got home from school just as Nicole had to leave for work. As usual, Nicole was picked up at the house by one of the other officers from the police department. In return, Nicole would drive the officer home as he or she would be just getting off of their shift. More often than not, it would be Karina just getting off of her shift as she would just leave the patrol car running in the driveway. Hi Sterling, Ronnie said as he walked into the kitchen and dropped his school backpack on the linoleum floor. Hi Ronnie. How are you doing? Good. I'm surprised to see that you are still here, Ron continued as he pulled a drinking glass out of an overhead cabinet. Well, that's because I now live with you guys, Ronnie. Sterling answered as he bent over and picked up Ronnie's bag from the floor. Wow. That's cool. When did? Ronnie. Karina interrupted as she walked into the kitchen. Eddie and Malachi are gonna be going over to Sterling's grandmother's house tonight to pick up the rest of Sterling's belongings. When they leave to do that, I want you to go downstairs and vacuum out that bedroom for Sterling. Okay. Alright. I'll probably do it sooner though so that I can get to bed for school tomorrow. Good thinking, hun. Day after tomorrow though, you'll be staying home from school so that you can attend the funeral with Sterling, Nicole, your dad, and I. Won't Malachi and Eddie be going to the funeral, Karina? Sterling interrupted. Well, no Sterling. It's a long story and someday we'll talk about it with you. For now though, just keep in mind that Eddie and Malachi cannot go outside during the day. Putting up her hand as she saw a look of question cross his face, she continued, like I said Sterling, it's just a long story. In fact, come this November Ronnie won't be able to go out during the day either. With this, Sterling's jaw looked, to Karina, that it was about to hit the floor. Later that night, as planned, Malachi, Eddie, and Sterling headed over to Mrs. Henderson's house to move his belongings into David's and Karina's house. The following day went by fairly quickly without incident as Sterling, David, Karina, and Nicole prepared for the funeral the next day. As previously planned, the funeral services for Mrs. Henderson started at 1 o'clock with the burial directly afterwards. Only about half of those that attended the funeral had actually showed up at the cemetery. If it hadn't been for the weather, the others would have probably showed up as well. Just moments before the end of the entire ordeal, Karina had put her hand into her purse to get out her gloves. With her hand in her purse, she had felt something that she wasn't familiar with. Grabbing a hold of it and pulling it out, she quickly realized that it was the black book that Sterling had given her the night that his grandmother had died. Out of curiosity, Karina opened the front cover of the book to find her name at the top of the first top page, with writing beneath it. Karina. 1 old Hispanic gentleman, bad guy. 1 white man, protector. 2 Hispanic children, mixed feelings. Nightmares stopped after Karina was able to identify all characters: old Hispanic man, her great-grandfather, Miguel Sanchez; white man, her to-be husband, David DeClue; 2 Hispanic children, her own children, Malachi and Ronnie. Turning the page, Karina found Malachi's name on top of it. Malachi. 1 old Hispanic man, bad guy. 1 Hispanic child, mixed feelings. Nightmares not resolved. Turning the page again, she found Ronnie's name on top of it. Ronnie. 1 old Hispanic man, bad guy. 2 Hispanic children, mixed feelings. Nightmares not resolved. On the last page, that had writing on it, was Eddie's name. Eddie. 1 old Hispanic man, bad guy. 1 Hispanic women, protector. 1 white man, protector. 2 Hispanic children, about his own age, mixed feelings. Nightmares not resolved. Karina wasn't to say alarmed, but rather surprised to see that Mrs. Henderson was documenting all of the nightmares. Seeing the nightmares being documented, however, had caused Karina to see a pattern in the nightmares. A pattern that began to make Karina dare herself to show her old picture of her great-grandfather to Malachi, Ronnie, and Eddie. Closing the book, as she put it back into her purse, Karina looked up to see that the burial ceremony was just ending. "Are you all right, honey?" David asked as he turned to face her. Yeah. I'm fine. You guys ready to go?" Raising the volume of her voice, so that Sterling and Nicole would hear, she quickly pulled on her gloves and then took her keys out, by their remote control, then handed them to David so that he could warm up the car. That following May, right on schedule, Malachi, Eddie, and Sterling all graduated as the class of 2016. With all the luck in the world, the weather there in Craig was extremely cloudy yet also dry. So, with their biological leash temporarily released, Malachi and Eddie were both able to enjoy their graduation with their peers. For Karina, David, Patty, Bill, and Mrs. Sanchez, the graduation was a very emotional period of time. It was almost hard to believe that Malachi, whom seemed to have been born only a short period of time before, was now graduating and was an adult as well. "It's like you were only born yesterday," Patty said as she hugged him lightly. "I love you very much, grandson." "I love you too, Grandma. And thank all of you guys for being here for me." With this, Malachi hugged and kissed Nicole, who was still in tears. Then, as Ronnie, Malachi, Sterling, Eddie, and the rest of the family turned to walk out of the school's auditorium, Karina and Nicole both found themselves to be staring at Larry Wallace, the chief of the Craig Police Department. "Well, Larry, come to see the graduation?" Karina asked with a big smile on her face. "Actually, that was my plan. Unfortunately though, I got myself tied up into an investigation. We have a 43-year-old male by the name of Eric Myers that is hiding out in the Craig area. He is wanted by the law out of Frankfort, Michigan for the murder of an officer. I need you, Karina, and Nicole to be out on patrol from now until we find this guy. I've got Kim Nay out in L1, I need one of you two to get L3 and then the other take your personal vehicle." "But Larry," Karina interrupted. "But nothing, Karina. I realize that this is Malachi's graduation. Go ahead and take your time. I want you to be on duty within the next 2 hours though. Understand?" 0 hours, congratulations Malachi, Larry said as he turned and faced him and then offered his hand for a handshake. "Thank you, Larry," Malachi responded as he shook the older man's hand. "Tell you what, girls," Larry started again. "It's 3 o'clock right now. Be out by 6, however, turn your radios on right when you get home. Deal?" "Okay. I've got L3 out in the school parking lot, I've got my wife with me in my truck. Her and I will be out on County Road 113 towards Rife, Kim is on County Road 113 going towards Baggs, Wyoming. I want one of you two to be on Interstate 40 towards Maybell, just west of Ridgeview, and then the other on Interstate 40 towards Hayden. Though this is backwards, the county is gonna be patrolling between those points. Here, Nicole, take the keys to L3. Consider it as your limo to take these 3 graduates home with." Larry finished, then turned and walked back out of the auditorium. "Nice limo for our graduation. The back seat of a patrol car. Couldn't be any better," Sterling joked. "Yeah, right," Eddie agreed. "Well, let's get everyone down to the house so that we can get this over with. Nicole, take Ronnie with you also." "I'll use the Eagle Talon," Karina said with an obvious sound of dislikeness in her voice. The graduation party that followed was one that Malachi, Sterling, and Eddie will remember for years to come. As for the issue of Eric Myers, however, that search may also last for a long time as well. As Larry Wallace had requested, both Nicole and Karina had been on the watch the night of the graduation, the next day, the week after, and then the following months as well. With reason to believe that Eric Myers either was, or would be, around, state and federal authorities insisted that the search continue. Turning his head as he continued to run, he could barely make out the figure that raced quickly behind him on his heels. Almost gaining the point of desperation, he quickly turned to face towards the direction that he was running just as the wicked creature suddenly appeared in front of him. Within the heavy fog that laid low to the ground, Eddie found himself to have been moving too quickly to prevent himself from landing into the creature's arms. "Leave me alone, help me." "Eddie," Eddie, wake up man. Eddie. Sterling was woken up right out of a dead sleep at the sound of desperate yelling. Running out of his room and then into Eddie's, he found his friend struggling underneath his blankets as if he was punching away at a ghost. Kneeling on the edge of the mattress, Sterling ripped the covers off of Eddie, almost getting hit by a misguided fist. Eddie, Sterling yelled again as he grasped onto his friend's wrist. What's going on? Malachi's voice suddenly yelled from behind Sterling's back. Then, as he carefully looked back towards Malachi, he quickly explained. Hess having a nightmare, Malachi. Please help me. At this, Malachi quickly kneeled beside Sterling and grasped onto Eddie's legs that were moving just as violently as the rest of his body. Seconds later, the swinging and kicking quickly came to an end as Eddie opened his eyes. It's all right, Eddie, Malachi said as he carefully released his hold onto Eddie's legs. With hesitation, Sterling let go of Eddie's arms moments later. Are you all right, Eddie? Sterling asked. Before Eddie could answer the question, Sterling got up to his feet as he continued to stare down towards his friend. Yeah. Or at least I will be. With his response, a couple beads of sweat rolled down off of his forehead and hid his face. Just as one of them was about to roll down into his eye, Malachi, who was still on the edge of the bed, reached towards Eddie's face and wiped the fast-moving bead with the sleeve of his shirt. Well. Now that you guys are awake, you might as well come upstairs and eat breakfast. What time is it? Eddie asked. As the question left his mouth, Eddie had attempted to look at the digital clock on his dresser, but his view was blocked by Malachi's presence. Looking at his watch, Sterling answered before Malachi could turn his head. It's 10:30. Almost time for lunch. Well, we can make it brunch then, Malachi said. Today is November 7th. Tomorrow is Ronnie's birthday. I need to help my parents get some arrangements done for the party, Malachi continued as he got up off of the bed. As he stepped up to his feet, he reached his hand out to Eddie to help him up. Hey Malachi. Karina called down the hallway just as Eddie, and Sterling reached the top of the stairs. I need you to call Belinda, honey, and make sure that she's gonna be here tomorrow. Also. Honey, are you still listening? Yeah, Mom. I'm listening. He really was listening, but had continued on into the kitchen to pick up the telephone so that he could call Belinda. Well, I need, either you or Eddie, or Sterling to go out to the big freezer and get Ronnie's birthday cake so that it will be defrosted on time. Alright? I'll go get it. Sterling volunteered, then immediately turned to head back down the stairs. With the yelling back and forth down the hallway, Ronnie woke up and walked out of the room. As he walked into the kitchen, Eddie pointed at Ronnie's head. Bad hair day, it looks like Ron. Better than the bad earache that I'll have if people keep yelling in this house. Ronnie had a look on his face that showed that he was obviously upset. Just relax, Ron. We're trying to get everything set up for your birthday tomorrow. Malachi spoke up as he pulled the phone away from his ear. I'm sorry guys. It's just that I was sleeping good. Without any nightmares anyhow. Well, I did have one this morning, Eddie said as he sat down with a bowl of Cheerios and a cup of coffee. For over 5 years now. At least once a week. Eddie. Tomorrow I'll be 13. I've had them my entire life just as Malachi has had them for his 18 years. Believe me, we know all about them. In the bedroom, Karina could hear the conversation between the boys in the kitchen. Quickly putting a few presents, that she had for Ronnie, in her closet, she decided to grab the old picture, that she had of her great-grandfather, out of the picture album so that she could show it to the boys. After pulling it out of the book, she walked out of the room and down the hallway to the kitchen. Hey guys. I want you to see something. Actually, it's a picture of someone. I want you to all look at it and then tell me if you recognize the person. Alright? Sounds simple to me, Malachi said as he hung up the phone. Oh, and by the way Mom, Belinda can come over for Ronnie's birthday, but her parents asked if it would be possible if she could come over today and then spend the night and then tomorrow night as well. Evidently they're celebrating their wedding anniversary. I told them yes. They're gonna drop her off about 6 o'clock this afternoon. Oh goody. Ronnie responded. Goody goody goody. Alright Ron. Relax a little, Karina said and then put the picture down on the table, face up, between Ronnie, Malachi, and Eddie. It was almost an eerie feeling, instantly, as all three of the guys went mute, eyes looking as though they were gonna pop out onto the floor, and their jaws in a locked open position. Sterling had returned, from the garage, with the cake and had put it into the refrigerator. Turning around and looking at Malachi, Eddie, and Ronnie, Sterling found it odd that not one of them had even noticed that he had returned. Walking up to the table, beside Ronnie, he noticed that their eyes were all stuck on a photograph that laid on the table. As Sterling looked at the picture as well, Karina had began to show that she was aware of his presence. "Sterling. It's all right, bud. What's going on? And who is that in the picture?" As he looked up to Karina's face for an answer, he still found it to be odd that his friend still hasn't acknowledged his presence. "Mom." Malachi started, "Who is this in the picture?" Karina noticed that her oldest son was beginning to shake and that a tear had filled the corner of Eddie's eye. As Karina looked at Ronnie, she noticed that he was about to start crying as well. "Excuse me, Sterling," Karina said as she walked away from his side. "Okay, guys." Raising her voice, she also picked up the picture and inserted it into her back pocket. All three of the boys' eyes seemed to follow the picture until it was hidden behind the denim material. Then, once it was out of sight, all of them seemed to relax. "Malachi, that is a picture of your great-great-grandfather, Miguel Gonzalez. Now listen, guys. I know that all three of you recognize him from your nightmares. I had the same problem as I was growing up. My nightmares, however, came to an end after I was able to identify all of the characters within the nightmares. I want you guys to go through the picture albums that we have, to see if you can match up the rest of the characters within your dreams. Understand me?" "Yes," Eddie answered. With his response, both Malachi and Ronnie nodded their heads yes as well. As the day progressed, Belinda was dropped off at the house at about 6 o'clock that evening. Shortly after her arrival, David had taken her and Ronnie both to the Safeway grocery store to pick out DVD movies and their choice of ice cream. Sterling spent most of the day sorting through his personal belongings in the garage, deciding what to bring into the house and what to keep outside. Though he had done this several times in the 8 months that he lived with the Declus, he couldn't really decide exactly what he wanted to keep in the house. In a sense, it was a way to distort the feeling of boredom. That night, Sterling, Ronnie, and Belinda all watched videos and ate ice cream while Eddie, Malachi, and Nicole went out for the night. For a little over 5 years now, Nicole, Malachi, and Eddie had it as a regular routine to go out over the town, then sometimes further away from town. Once they went to Amarillo, Texas, and then got home with still almost 2 hours left till daylight. They all knew that, starting the following day, Ronnie just might be out with them on their late-night adventures. Malachi, Eddie, and Nicole all looked forward to the addition of Ronnie to their little quests in the darkened hours. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning when the outing came to an end. Then, as Eddie, Malachi, and Nicole walked in through the kitchen sliding glass door, they found Belinda and Ronnie sleeping on separate couches and Sterling fast asleep with his face down into a pillow on the living room floor. The television was still on, along with the DVD player. With this, there was also ice cream bowls on the end tables that separated the two couches. As a joke, and to say happy birthday to his little brother before anyone else had a chance, Malachi felt that it might be worth the slight diminutive level of trouble by scaring him out of his sleep. Walking up to Ronnie's side, Malachi decided that he was gonna slam his hands on the arm of the couch to startle him out of his sleep. Kneeling down, on the opposite side of the couch's arm, so that he could hide, Nicole looked at Malachi from the kitchen. "Malachi, what are you doing?" she whispered loudly. "Let him sleep in." Intending to ignore her suggestion of allowing Ronnie to sleep, he turned his head to face his brother. As he looked over the arm of the couch, searching for Ronnie's head, he couldn't see him. Climbing up to stand on his feet, he realized that Ronnie was. "Boo!" Ronnie suddenly yelled from up above Malachi's head. At the sudden scream, Malachi fell onto the floor with his arms and legs wrapped tightly to his stomach, in the fetal position. "Ha ha. Didn't work now, did it?" "Oh my God, Ronnie. You just scared the shit out of me," Malachi said as he got back up to his feet. "When did you realize that you could fly?" "About an hour after Belinda and Sterling fell asleep." As Ronnie began to explain about his new ability, Sterling started to move around in his sleep. Come on down here, Ronnie. We'll continue talking downstairs or in my room. Without another word said, they all walked down the hallway and into Malachi's and Nicole's bedroom. Right after Sterling and Belinda fell asleep, Ronnie began to explain just as the door latched. Elle went out onto the back porch. It didn't work at first, but then I kept going out there about once every half hour. About an hour ago it worked. I kinda figured that since it's my birthday that you might try to do something to me in my sleep. Though I had to fight to stay awake, I did just so that I could spook you. Well, it worked, you little shit. Now come over here so that I can give you a birthday hug. Rather than just the plain old hug, Malachi gave Ronnie a big bear hug. Congratulations, little bro. I love you. Thank you, Malachi. This seems so weird. Letting go of the hug, Ronnie pulled back and took a step backwards. Now I can go out with you, Eddie, and Nicole. Right? Yep. Just keep in mind though that we need to stick together when we're outside. Also, always remember that we have to be home before daylight. Unless, Nicole interrupted, we make plans to stay out somewhere like in a motel, under a bypass, or... Nicole. Eddie cut in. You've got to work, and also Ronnie does still have schooling to deal with, even if it is gonna be at home. Eddie. I've got weekends off, and also Ronnie shouldn't have school on the weekends. We can do it. Let's just make sure that we make plans beforehand so that we can have food and the money for whatever we decide to do with our time. Actually, Malachi interrupted. This sounds like a good idea. Let's do that. Let's make plans to go out sometime for the entire weekend. You know, Mom and Dad could use the peace and quiet. With this idea, Ronnie, Eddie, Nicole, and even Malachi were very excited. All four of them, to themselves, had began to imagine different places that they could go as a group. And yes, David and Karina would enjoy the peace in the house. And, just to subside any worries, they could take their cell phones with them. With these ideas fresh in their minds, they tried to get some sleep. For the most part, anyhow, their attempts failed. They did get plenty of rest though. Then, at about 11:30, almost noon, Karina and David were getting the cake and ice cream ready as they went through the house getting everyone up. As Ronnie sat down at the table with his cake sitting in front of him, he found himself wishing, as he had many times before, that his friend, James, was there to celebrate the birthday as well, or at least be able to share the joy that he currently felt with James. With this thought, however, he also remembered Jamie's and Lloyd's words during their last séance. "We're with you through each step of your life." With this memory, and as his family was singing happy birthday, Ronnie thought to himself, "I miss you, James." Just as the happy birthday song was coming to an end, and he could hear his grandpa Declue telling him to make a wish, faintly, in the background, Ronnie could just make out Jamie's voice. "I miss you too, Ronnie. Happy birthday." With these words, Ronnie smiled so deeply that everyone there, at his birthday party, knew that Ronnie was perhaps the happiest child alive. With those words, Ronnie had known for a fact that his longtime friend was there, and always will be there. Watching from across the table, Eddie saw the change in Ronnie's face and body language. Eddie knew that the change that he had just witnessed could only come from one place. Beyond the grave. "Hey, Ron." Eddie spoke up above the volume of everyone else. Then, as Ronnie turned his head to face Eddie, Ron could see Eddie giving him a thumbs up. With this, Ron's smile grew bigger. "Hey, Ronnie. Did you make a wish?" Bill asked as Ronnie blew out the 13 candles. "Yeah, I did. And it was granted 8 years ago." Karina and David, for some reason, had known that Ronnie's answer had to do with James Albert's death. Without question, however, they took joy in knowing that their son was happy. It was that following weekend that Malachi, Nicole, Eddie, and Ronnie decided that they would go out for an entire weekend. Sterling made plans to stay out at a friend's house for the entire weekend, and so David and Karina would have the whole house to themselves. David and Karina hadn't only felt at ease with the weekend outing, but had very much looked forward to having the house all to themselves. When this vacation was brought up to David, Karina told him that they were going on a road trip with a friend of theirs. Not only did David and Karina agree to this, They also both gave the kids cash money. Nicole also took the majority of one of her paychecks. "Now, you guys make sure that you take your cell phones with you so that I can get a hold of you," Karina pushed. It was late March of 2017 that this shindig was planned. On the previous night, with a walk down to the Safeway grocery store, a few of the food items, that they knew would be hard to find in the late hours, quickly filled a few backpacks. Alvin, Texas. It would be a perfect place. It's in Texas, where it's warmer than Colorado. It's a small town, yet close enough to Houston so that we can do late-night sightseeing, and it's fairly close to Galveston where we can enjoy swimming in the Gulf of Mexico, Eddie said as he had been just complaining about the cold weather in Colorado. Or, Traverse City, Michigan. Malachi suggested, though it is winter still, they have a real nice motel called the Wolf Lodge that has an indoor water park. A real nice ski resort called Crystal Mountain, and a few casinos such as Turtle Creek. Also, Nicole, there are nice malls in Traverse City without the big city violence. Well, Ronnie, do you have any ideas? You're in on this too, you know, Nicole said. I just think that it would be cool to leave this country. Ronnie started. Over the years Ron had gained a little attitude towards the political system in the United States after the Bush regime that had destroyed the U.S. economy several years prior. Years later the Bush regime had even began to turn on their own party, knocking Governor Schwarzenegger out of the political race because he supported equal rights for all minorities, like Wales, or England. Or better yet, Australia. I think that, for right now, we should try to stay a little closer to home, within our own borders anyway. Perhaps later though when we have more time. Nicole spoke up again. In the end, and agreed on by everyone, Alvin, Texas was chosen as the destination. It was also decided that in a future trip that they would go to Traverse City, Michigan, and then later, overseas to Australia. That night, as David and Karina went to bed, Malachi, Ronnie, Nicole, and Eddie stepped out the back door of the house to begin their journey. Before heading out they all said goodbye to David and Karina. It just doesn't make sense to me, honey. They're going to be out on a trip with a friend, yet they leave the house, through the back door, into a fenced-in yard. It would make more sense to leave out the front door. Dave complained. Honey. It's just more exercise for them. Now let's go to bed. I'm not tired yet, and we don't work tomorrow. Let's stay up late together. Dave. I said to bed, not to sleep. With this said a flash of excitement went through David's face. Walking back to the darkest part of the yard, behind the garage, all four of the kids took to flight, mid-step, and then grouped up together at about 400 feet above the town. With Ronnie trailing behind, Malachi kept a tight grip onto Nicole's hand as Eddie led the way. Hey Malachi. What direction do you want to take? Eddie asked and he looked backwards. Just follow Interstate 40. It should take us about 10 minutes to reach Denver from. As Malachi paused he looked down towards the ground and realized that they were already nearing Steamboat Springs area. They had just left Craig like 3 minutes prior, we're already over Steamboat Springs. It might take only a few minutes to reach Denver. Malachi was trying to calculate 50 miles into 3 minutes in order to estimate their time to Denver. Once we hit Denver, we're gonna head south to Colorado Springs. From there we'll go east to Boise City, Oklahoma, south to Amarillo, Texas, southeast on 6 to Houston, and then on to Alvin. At the rate of speed that we're moving right now we should make it in about an hour to an hour and a half. Malachi finished. Better than driving. Nicole responded, driving would take us about 3 days or so. Hey guys. Ronnie spoke up from behind. Can we all hold hands so that we don't lose track of each other in the dark? Yeah, we can do that, Ronnie, Malachi said. No, he rolled his eyes. Come on up here. Simultaneously Eddie fell behind so that they were all together. Moments later, only about 10 minutes after they left Craig, they were over Denver. Up to that point the trip went smooth with an exception of almost having a run-in with Rabbit Ears Pass. A peak on the south side of the interstate. After about an hour and 45 minutes of watching street lights, down below, pass by with lightning speed, Malachi, Ronnie, and Eddie had finally arrived in Alvin, Texas. Still keeping a tight hold onto each other's hands, the four of them came down to only about 100 feet off of the level of the streets. Still following Highway 6 they came up to a Holiday Inn and then, only 2 buildings away from there, was the Alvin Motel. There's a good place to land, Ronnie said. No, he pointed behind the building that separated the Holiday Inn from the Alvin Motel. On Ronnie's K, the 4 of them descended to just over the level of the roofs. Careful guys, Eddie said as he used his free hand to point at a patrol car parked at a gas station, kitty corner from the Holiday Inn. There's a cop car over there. Then, just as they slowed down to a standstill in the area that Ronnie had pointed out, they landed slowly and firmly onto the ground. Okay guys. Nicole spoke up, it's only, according to my cell phone, 10:30. Let's just pay for a room for a couple of nights in the Holiday Inn. We'll get 2 separate rooms with a door that connects them. This way we'll have a place that we can call home for the weekend. There's the front door. Nicole pointed at a double swinging door right off of the main road. Hi. How can I help you guys? A young clerk asked as they walked in. Taking a guess, Nicole figured that the young man was probably in his mid to late teens. Ah yes. I would like 2 separate rooms please, and, if possible, we would like it to be one of those with the connecting door between them. Alright. And for how long will you be staying with us? As the clerk asked questions, he was typing on a computer as well. Seconds later, a printer in the corner began to print out paperwork. For 2 nights. We'll be leaving Sunday night, Nicole said as she pulled out her wallet and driver's license. That's good ma'am, however, if you're gonna stay through or beyond noon on Sunday we'll need you to pay for another night's stay. Do you still want to do that? Yeah. We'll pay for that. Also, I noticed that you have a swimming pool. Where is the nearest place to buy swimming suits? Nicole asked as she saw an ambulance passing by the motel. Right over there. Across the street, in the morning. The clerk pointed to the kitty corner across the main intersection, Highway 6, and West South Street. Alright, thank you. And, when does that pool open? Nicole continued. Ma'am, it's open 24 hours a day. Anyone under the age of 15, however, must be accompanied by an adult. As the clerk said this, he looked over towards Ronnie. Is this gonna be all for you? Yes sir. Alright, that'll be $160. Then, before you leave just bring your keys back up to the desk. Alright, now all that I need is your ID and for you to sign right here, he said as he pointed at an X written in red ink. Nicole signed 2 forms, 1 for each room, and then was handed a total of 4 keys. 2 for each room. As Nicole put her driver's license back into her wallet, the clerk noticed her badge and police identification. As he noticed this, he seemed to swallow hard as Nicole, Malachi, Ronnie, and Eddie began to walk away. Eddie and Malachi both quickly turned and walked into a Chinese restaurant directly across the hall from the clerk's desk. Nicole. We're hungry, let's eat, Malachi said just as him and Eddie walked out of sight. Come on Ronnie. You should be hungry by now too. With that said, Nicole and Ronnie both followed behind Malachi and Eddie. Later that night, after going through their rooms and deciding what television programming would be watched, the 4 of them, together, enjoyed themselves in the swimming pool as they tried to decide what they were gonna do the next day. Because of the fact that they didn't have swimming suits, they all stayed up late and waited until they had the pool to themselves. Malachi, Eddie, and Ronnie swam in their underwear while Nicole swam in her jeans. It was almost daylight when the 4 of them headed off to bed. Going into their separate rooms, they quickly dozed off, without movies, and extremely wet. Then, at about 7 o'clock that night, as Ronnie was the first out of bed, the 4 of them regrouped into one of the 2 rooms to decide what was on the agenda. Let's just walk around Alvin and find a park or something. There's an overcast outside tonight. Ronnie suggested. How about we go down to Galveston and go swimming in the Gulf, Eddie said. Or to a mall in Houston. Hey guys. Remember that, even though it is cloudy outside, that it's still daylight. We can't fly right now. Nicole was even becoming lost for ideas. Until dark anyway. Well. Let's do this. Let's do exactly what Ronnie just suggested. We can walk around and look for a local park. As we do this, maybe we'll find something that interests us. Like maybe a mall, or different restaurants. Personally, I think that we can do a little of all of that. Malachi spoke up, let's go play down in a park. In the process we can tour around Alvin. I think that I heard last night, in that Chinese restaurant downstairs, a few customers talking about a mini mall here in Alvin. Then, after dark, we can fly down to Galveston to go swimming. With our flying speed that should take about 3 to 5 minutes each way. We can swim down there for a couple hours and then be back here on time to watch Da Vinci Code that comes on at midnight. After that, oh yeah, we need to buy swimming suits tonight. We can swim in the Holiday Inn swimming pool again. This plan will allow all of us to do a little of what we want. Approximately 10 minutes later, Malachi, Eddie, Ronnie, and Nicole were all headed out the door searching for a park. It was shortly after they had left the motel that they had passed an elementary school on the right and then found a park on the left side of the road. South Street. It seems that every community that I've ever seen has a South Street. Eddie commented. Actually, Eddie, that's West South Street, Ronnie said jokingly as they walked into the park. After about an hour of pushing each other on the merry-go-round, they soon headed out of the park. And continued walking in the same direction as they had when they found the park. After turning left at a stoplight and then another long length of walk, they did come across a mini mall where they each bought swimming suits and then ate at a donut shop, within the same complex, just prior to dusk turning to dark. Then, as darkness fell over southern Texas, all four of them departed from the mini mall's parking lot, and then headed south to Galveston. The trip to Galveston actually took about 7 minutes due to a slight mishap in directions on Eddie's part. They had found themselves flying over Houston before they realized that they hadn't turned when they should have. Almost moving into the path of a 767 airliner, had woken the kids up to the fact that they had gone the wrong way. Ah. Maybe we need to buy a handheld GPS, Mr. Yeesh, Nicole joked as they landed at the beach. No thank you. Eddie responded as he quickly pulled his shirt off. Hey Ronnie. Yeah, Eddie? Ron had sat down in the sand and was struggling to remove his tennis shoes as he suddenly caught Eddie's t-shirt in the face. Come on now, I'll never get to swim in the ocean if I have obstacles every which way I turn my head. With this, Ronnie threw the shirt back at Eddie. Then, as he finally got his laces untied, he quickly removed his shoes and then ripped off his pants, rolled them up into a ball and then hit Eddie on the back of the head just as he had turned towards the open waters. I'll get you for that. Eddie laughed as he turned and then began to chase Ronnie across the water's edge. Watch out, Malachi and Nicole. Ronnie, Eddie, Malachi, and Nicole all enjoyed themselves for a few hours before they had decided that it was time to find something to eat. For the most part, Malachi and Nicole swam within just waist-deep water, holding each other, as Ronnie and Eddie had chased each other up and down the beach and then out into the deeper waters. Hunger, along with Ronnie mentioning something in regards to pizza, had made it feel as though starvation was setting in. Hey, let's get the pizza from that Domino's Pizza here in Galveston, then we can head back to Alvin on time to see Da Vinci's Code. For the most part, the rest of the vacation was very much like that first day, fun and activities during the evening until early the following morning and then sleeping during the day. Their evening outings took them to different areas within the southern Texas area, including the NASA Space Station Center in Houston. That Sunday night, the four of them made it safely back to Craig, Colorado to be with their family. As much as Malachi, Ronnie, Nicole, and Eddie enjoyed their vacation, David and Karina had also enjoyed their vacation within their own home. Just as the four got home from Texas, Sterling too had come back from his weekend outing with his friends.